You're watching a featured replay from the session called Prayers to Performa, a convening focus on helping faith-rooted organizations responsibly engage in housing development.
In this discussion, leaders in finance, community development, and law explore how community development corporations and other legal entities can protect congregations and financial and operational risk.
As faith organizations consider stepping into affordable housing, protective structures are not optional, they are essential.
This session offers clarity on how to serve boldly while remaining insulated from unnecessary liability.
Let's take a look.
We've heard a lot today about what the issue is, right? We've been very diagnostic. We understand that there's an affordable housing crisis. We understand that faith-based organizations here in Columbus and Central Ohio have, I believe it was 2,000 plus parcels that could help solve that need. But how many of you know that if you go to church on Sunday, you cannot take an offering and begin to build affordable housing? So today we want to talk a little bit about the protective structures that will allow our faith-based organizations to participate in the affordable housing solution. And before we get started, I want to give a little bit of a backdrop. About 2,000 years ago, the greatest faith leader that the world has ever known created the most successful nonprofit organization that the world has ever seen. He recruited 12 men to be on his board of directors. He trained them for 3 years, and he taught them to consider the immigrant, the widow, and the poor. The mission of this organization was to provide permanent supportive housing. And after 3 years, he stepped away. Now, 11 of those board members maintained the mission. One of those board members decided to go work for corporate. And so, but interestingly enough, 2 of those board members, one named Matthew and the other named Mark, they heard him speak before he left. And what he said to them was, he said, I want you to go into the places that I'm sending you, and I want you to share what you have experienced with me. Now, Matthew and Mark were 2 distinctly different individuals. When Matthew heard it, Matthew heard him say, go to the ethnos, which is where we get the word ethnicity. So he told Matthew, go to where the people are. But Mark heard something different. What Mark heard was, Mark heard him say, go to the cosmos, and that's where we get the orderly arrangement of things. And so today, as we frame this conversation about CDCs, community development corporations, and CHDOs, community housing development organizations, I want you to put yourself in the place of those 2 men who were given an instruction to go to the people and go to the places and the systems. When you go to the people and you go to the places, you go to a place called community. Does that make sense? All right. So to help us navigate that today, we have an illustrious panel. We have Adam Troy. Adam is the president and CEO of Troy Enterprises. We have Jeaneen Hooks. She is the executive director at Miracit Development Corporation. And we have Mike Premo. And he is the executive director at Church and Community Development for All People. So we're gonna do what I call pass the mic. I'm an 80s baby, a 90s hip hop guy, so used to go to freestyle sessions and we would pass the mic back and forth. So we're gonna do a pass the mic session. 5 minutes, you are on the clock for your first question. Adam, we're going to start with you. Talk a little bit about the value that a faith group can have about creating an independent organization for its housing. So the value of having a CDC or a CHDO.
Speed to market is what immediately comes to mind, particularly for those of us on the private side. It gets down to time and dollars. And if you have a faith-based institution that is already rooted in community, that also sees, all business comes down to units, quite frankly. Faith-based organization sees thousands of units every Saturday or Sunday without having to send out a memo.
Yeah.
So if it's speed to market and you're trying to either get, a hot dog stand that sells 1 hot dog or a hot dog stand that sells 1,000, you're gonna go to the 1,000. Mm-hmm. And so just on sheer business, numbers in terms of the faith-based piece gets you there. They don't necessarily have to ask for permission. Here's the other reason why that becomes important. If you're linked with the right faith-based institution, you have automatic political cover in any market. I do business all across the United States. And so when I drop into a particular neighborhood, I don't necessarily have to see the mayor, I don't have to see the city council people, I don't have to see the commissioner, because those churches with their membership already are rooted and grounded in terms of integrity. So for a person who's looking for speed to market, it's great on that side as well. The difference in terms of what separates most faith-based institutions from a development perspective versus private sector is exactly that. We have the ability to move beyond bricks and sticks.
Are there risks included with operating a housing program or building out the congregation itself?
There are, and it's nuanced. Curtis Williams and I were talking about this in the back of the room, and here's what most people miss. Those who are here who are representing faith-based institutions, you have to be multilingual, right? It's not just about the bricks and sticks. It's not just about the X and O's. And oftentimes you need people in the room who are bilingual enough to speak to the private side, but can also sit down with the joint board and help them understand the merits of the deal. And so the risk are people may be nodding in affirmation, but in the back of their minds, if you don't understand the language, you'll go down one road and you'll do pre-development agreements, you'll spend hundreds of thousands of dollars, and you'll get to the point where it's supposed to be transaction time, and the church just put a pause on it, and you never saw it coming. So the big risk is really taking the time to move beyond bricks and sticks and understand the nuance and the importance of being able to communicate on both sides of it.
Okay, excellent.
And I'll just give you,
Please.
one, there's probably a number of preachers in here who gonna steal that opening that you gave. That was phenomenal, man. So I'm gonna remember that. But we call that the intersectionality of the sacred and the secular.
Yes, sir.
And if you are not in that room and understand how the sacred connects up to the secular, you will miss it every time, every time. So just an important nuance.
Yes, sir. All right, thank you. Jeaneen, you have a long history of serving at nonprofit organizations, and Miracit has a long history of serving the Mock Road community and corridor. But you're relatively new to this role. Can you talk about how you developed this new vision for your work and what it took to get the plan off the ground?
Great question. Before I start, I do want to thank AHACO and PACT and the sponsors that brought this convening together. This is monumental, especially for somebody that's relatively new in this development space, the amount of information that I've learned, but also the affirming environment that we're in to know that we're doing the right thing. The very first affirmation I got is when the bishop, the pastor, the reverend got up and talked about Nehemiah, because that is exactly what I studied before I took my role. Miracit Development Corporation has been around for 30 years. They are the CDC that operates out of Living Faith Apostolic Church. The first thing that I had to do after I accepted the role was to honor the legacy that Miracit has and what they did in the community. They built over 300 homes. They revitalized commercial space and businesses. I believe off of Bishop Edgar Posey's tree, correct me if I'm wrong, many churches started to step into the community development space. So I really had to step back and learn what that legacy was. What did it mean to the community? And then I had to listen. I had to listen to the church. I had to listen to my board. I had to listen to community members to understand what did that mean to them then? What did that mean going forward? And how do I steward that from 2025 and beyond? And then I had to see it for myself. I had to walk the streets. I had to go into the neighborhoods, drive up and down so I could have a relationship with the legacy, with the story, with the people, with the things that I was listening to, and make that connection. And then from that, started to build partnerships. So frankly, it was really simple for me. I put people in my car and I called it the Drive and Dream Tour. Many of you in this room have been in the car with me, where I told the story, and it was a narrative about the history and where we're moving forward. I made sure that we were looking at it from an asset framing perspective and not looking at the disinvestment or the blight, but that they could see the institutions that are on Mock Road in that corridor, They can understand that we have green space, that this is a neighborhood that is full of housing, not high density developments, not that there's anything wrong with that, but this is a community that has a unique culture and pride based on being a mixed income neighborhood, community development, and very strong in that. So in my first year, that was all that I did. I had to honor that legacy. I had to learn. I had to see. And then my due was starting to build what those partnerships would be. And from there, I was able to strategically put forward a master conceptual plan that talked about all the things that we're going to do, right? That talked about not only housing, all types of housing, low-income housing, to market rate housing, to affordable housing. How do we revitalize the plaza? How do we build up the people that are around the neighborhood in existing homes and help them with home improvement opportunities? But ultimately, always knowing that the end in mind, from Bishop Posey to Sharon Francis, who was the architect at one point, to the role that I have, is we want to show the goodness of God in the land of the living right now, right? So that we can help them seek and reach for salvation. So that is what I've been doing, what I've done. And then from there, I was able to stabilize. Of course, we had our master plan, and then it was a matter of building strategically internally, building up my board, adding on a team so that we can duplicate our efforts in a very smart, comprehensive, and strategic and intentional way, so that when I'm going to the city and the county and the state or other partners, I'm not fragmented. They know the whole story, they see the whole picture, they do the drive-in dream tour, but before they get out of my car, they're saying, how can we help, Jeaneen? And that's exactly the point. So that's what I've been doing.
I want to just take a pause really quick, Mike, before we get to you, and just to give some definition to a couple of terms that we've heard today and on this panel thus far. So you've heard the term CDCs, or Community Development Corporations. And so I reached out to the great prophet Google last night. And a community development corporation is a 501c3 nonprofit, community-based organization that revitalizes underserved neighborhoods primarily through affordable housing development, economic growth, and social services. Operating on local levels, they often function as developers and intermediaries to improve quality of life, foster community resilience, and address systemic needs. That's a CDC, a Community Development Corporation. The other thing that you'll hear is the word CHDO, which is CHDO, Community Housing Development Organizations. This is a specific type of private community-based nonprofit designated by the U.S. Department of HUD that's primary mission is to develop, own, and sponsor affordable housing in low to moderate income communities. Low to moderate income communities are communities where the average median income is where the average income is 80% of the AMI. So in Columbus, Ohio, the low to moderate income threshold right now is $86,820 per year. Now, as a banker, the reason why I would stress that CHDOs and CDCs are important is because no bank ever wants to foreclose on a church. Does that make sense? No bank wants to come in on Sunday morning at 11 o'clock or 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock, whatever time you meet, and have to tell you, hey, this project did not scale, and so we have to foreclose. The CDCs and the CHDOs insulate the church and allow for them to do development in the community without risking the work that they're doing to feed the souls of their congregants. Does that make sense? All right. I need some response. Does that make sense? All right. All right, so Mike, you and Community Development for All People are one of the most prolific faith-based affordable housing developers in Central Ohio, and probably the largest place-based one. Can you walk us through how an idea develops?
So let me start by just giving an overview of Community Development for All People. And so the United Methodist Church for All People, located at Parsons and Whittier, created Community Development for All People. It is a nonprofit with its own separate board of directors. The board of directors of CD4AP are appointed by the Church for All People. So it's an independent organization, and at the same time, the church reserves the right, if the nonprofit should start to go in a direction the church doesn't approve of, that they can fire the board of Community Development for All People. They can close down the organization. They maintain that power. I say they as if I'm not a church member and also serving on the church leadership team. So I'm on both sides. But technically, it's set up to ensure that the CDC always follows the mission of the church. So in the course of our years, like we have, this all started, by the way, and Reverend Edgar's around here somewhere, so if I get the details wrong. Back in the day, Reverend Edgar was the pastor of the church and the executive director of the nonprofit. He gave a sermon on Sunday talking about the importance of affordable housing, and somebody came up to him afterwards and said, I have a duplex, it's yours. You fix it up, you rent it out, you do what you want to do with it. So we'd never done this before, and we put out a call to our community asking for volunteers who could help us rehab this house. And everybody who turned up to volunteer was an absolute master in home renovations in their own minds. So it didn't go well. You know, the adage in construction is measure twice, cut once. Ours was if you cut a piece of drywall enough times, it'll fit somewhere. So the walls weren't exactly smooth. At one point, the city came to do an inspection, and they shut us down because we hadn't pulled the proper permits. John likes to say he made a valiant defense of the separation of church and state, and in return, he got a nice big red sticker on the front of the door. But we then hired a general contractor, we got the building developed, and then at the end, the city of Columbus actually invited us to become a CHDO, a community housing development. So over the years, our housing work has taken on vastly different forms, and we and our partners have done north of $150 million in affordable housing development in the city of Columbus. It's scattered site units, meaning like houses, like individual houses. It's multi-unit apartment complexes. It's working through with for-profit developers on low-income housing tax credit or LIHTC deals. But the vision of it all is we want the South Side to be a place where all people can live and thrive. And when we started the work, the community was heavily blighted. There were some blocks where 60% of the houses were boarded up and vacant. Over the years, we and our partners developed more housing there, and we reached kind of a tipping point where private investors started to come in. And then we were worried that the area could easily gentrify. So there's this myth out there that you have two choices. You can either have blight or you can have gentrification. And we reject that, and the proof is the work that we've done on the South Side to make sure we are not only building affordable housing, but we are doing what we can to maintain the affordable housing that exists. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
All right.
Mission accomplished.
Thank you. Thank you. If a group does not currently have a separate entity to contain their housing work, how would you recommend they start?
Every housing work, every piece of project of housing that we do, first of all, has a separate LLC. That is critically important. So something goes wrong and the LLC gets sued. There are no assets in the LLC at the end of the day other than the property itself. They can't go after the church. They can't go after the nonprofit. So that's essential. And our attorney, Joel Tieford, who recently retired, has set up more LLCs for us than I didn't even realize could exist from one organization, because each and every time we do a separate development of housing, it's in its own LLC. And I think that's really important.
Nothing really to essentially add there. I think Mike is exactly on point. I would also say to you internally, have the conversation with your leadership to get to what the real fears are. No matter what your race, creed, or color, or denomination, it will typically come down to three things. One, and what he talked about was structure and the legality of it. That's two pieces. So people typically don't want to admit, one, they have a fiduciary concern, meaning that we are open to lose money. Two, there's the legal component. We are open to be sued. Three, which most of them don't talk about, is control. So if you structure it legally and financially around that, based upon the initial conversation, you'll wind up with the structure that he talked about. What's interesting is that, as Mike knows, and I don't see Reverend Egger in the room, we have the exact same structure where the church legally is the sole legal member of our CDC. That's because based upon the business that we do, a CDC's budget could pretty easily outstrip that of the church. And then you get a situation where you potentially have the tail wagging the dog. So Miss Williams, who sits over here and comes to church, who doesn't understand the sophistication of that, as a member of the church, based upon most constitutions, can call a church meeting within 2 weeks, and the church can vote to shut the CDC down. That's the balance of it. So you want to really make sure that your structure's in place before you get too excited about the opportunity. And to do it quick justice, because oftentimes I'm called on a consulting role, as most people know, here in Columbus, I represent the CDC interest of New Salem Baptist Church. Typically, we introduce it on the private side because in our family, we have a model that we don't work for one another. So I don't work for the church. My brother can dismiss me as a consultant at any point in time. That's how we keep our checks and balances, right? And so we've been in this business for almost 3 decades now. We've literally done almost $250 million worth of development between commercial and housing. So if you're in that Northeast corridor, everything from Easton to the Giant Eagle to the CVS to the Tim Hortons to the Speedway to the housing up and down Agler Road, that's all on our footprint. So we've had an opportunity to get a varying degree of experiences, work with a number of partners who are in the room. Johnny Pitts, raise your hand. Miracit, we worked with early on. So if you don't do nothing else today, find somebody who you don't know, who's been in the space, and figure out how they give you the benefit of their mistakes so you don't make those same mistakes.
Jeaneen, do you want to weigh in as well?
I will, just and in my young experience compared to the seasoned experience on the stage, the protections, but what it does is it allows the requisite expertise to lead the development initiatives of the church. No shade against pastors. I love my pastor, my bishop, but not all pastors are born to do development. Right? So you want people and you want to have access to people that have the legitimate and requisite expertise to manage the deals, the legal side, the fiduciary side, the marketing side. You need people that will be able to step into those roles, provide guidance and feedback to the board, to the church, so that they have that information. But that's critically important, at least what I've seen in my experience. And I think the other thing that we haven't talked about is being part of the CDC kind of umbrella. There's resources, access, education, information, and then networking and partnership. And guess what? Everybody wants to partner with the faith-based CDC these days. So it's really, really good to be in this space at this time of life. So that's what I would add.
Okay. And if you would, just to piggyback on that, talk a little bit about the framework of support that does exist in Central Ohio for CDCs. And then also, would you talk a little bit about what developing a CDC or an CHDO gives access to for the faith-based organization from a financial standpoint?
Real quick, sometimes you can be so close to something, you don't appreciate the immensity of what you've got, right? And we should give another round of applause to the organizers of today's event. Y'all do that for me real quick. Because the access is important. You got people in the room like Mallory. Hopefully y'all can afford her hourly rate because she's expensive, man, but she's worth it. She is absolutely worth it, right? If she brings me a deal, I don't have to skin it or anything. I know that they are ready to go. So part of it is just making sure that you take advantage of what's in the room, because as a person who travels north, east, south, and west, this is rare. It is absolutely rare. So that's number one. The advantage, and my sister talked about it, again, it's access to speed to market. It's access to funding opportunities that people will hide behind the whole separation of church and state, not understanding, quite frankly, that it was the church that put the separation of church and state in the motion, not the state.
Come on, sir.
And so what you begin to understand is that the CDC basically gives you another room in the house, another car in the garage, that allows the church to receive funding without being skewed, right, between those lanes, to still get the mission work done of the church. And correct me if I'm wrong, the beauty about their model is their CDC can literally underwrite everything they do from a missions perspective. Most churches wish they had that, right? And so to the extent that you put the CDC out front, I'll give you a case in point. We negotiated, some of you know, we own 60 acres off of Agler Road. So where the Giant Eagle is and the development, that next 60 acres, right? Abbott Labs used to own that property. So we flew to Abbott Labs with about 12 of us. We get to the negotiation. Abbott Labs said, we got one problem. We don't do business. We have a corporate policy, but we don't do business with churches for the very reason that you mentioned earlier. No corporation or no bank wants to foreclose on a church. Not a problem. Because I'm in the meeting, I just flip my hat backwards and we move from the church to the CDC. Right? That whole deal was set up, but we were able to house it inside of the CDC. Without that sort of structure or the CHDO structure, you back to square one.
Thank you. Mike?
And I just want to add, so as Community Development for All People is a CDC, but also a CHDO. The money that the federal government sets aside for affordable housing work, there is I think it's 15% of that funding has to be directed to CHDOs. So by us being a CHDO, we have access to money that other organizations do not. That works in two ways. Number one, if we've got a crazy idea, we can go to the city and say, we want to rehab some houses or we want to buy, and they're likely to want to participate in that. Number two, it makes you very attractive to for-profit developers when they want to do low-income housing or LIHTC deals, because that brings access. So for example, we're in the midst of negotiating a new deal with one of our for-profit developers. We have city certification as a CHDO, and we just got state certification as a CHDO. So that's two pools of money that the project could pool from. It's not guaranteed, but just that we have access to that they wouldn't have if they didn't partner with us. So I think that's really important to remember. The other thing I want to point out too is the separation of church and state. That is real. I mean, we have folks all the time, and we're able to answer the question right away and say, this does not fund the programs of the church. Your money isn't going to go to pay for the bread and juice on Sunday. It's not going to go toward Bibles or anything. It's going to go toward the mission of the work. And if that's the case, and also all of your programming is open to the public, meaning you're not just doing it for church members, you're doing it for the general public, that will ease any concerns that for-profit or philanthropic funders will have. So I think that's really important to keep in mind as well.
Excellent. Thank you for that. 2 minutes, final thoughts, then we're going to open up for questions.
The housing need in Columbus is real, in our region is real. I appreciated the information shared by CEO Isom of the Community Shelter Board. It makes me look at what I'm doing a little bit differently. Where can we help with those two pieces that seem to be missing in our neighborhood and in our footprint? I see lots of people that I'm going to reach out to for partnership and figure it out. So I think that this convening it's almost an embarrassment of riches.
Yeah.
Right? Where we have so many talented people that are willing to do this work and make it happen. There's no reason we shouldn't be, as a region, a model for the country on how to get it done right. Thank you, Lord.
I always use this acronym. Just remember to care. C-A-R-E. 1, C, take the time to connect. Doesn't matter if it's white collar, blue collar, no collar. Take the time to see people, not just where they are, but beyond the optics, meaning to understand them. Number 2, certainly as faith-based institutions, take the time to affirm people's humanness, right? You need to make sure that you connect, that you affirm who they are first, and that you align resources, right? And relationships, which leads me to the R, resources and relationships. Don't hold that close to the vest. Part of you being here is to make sure that you're bringing your resources and your relationships to the table so that you can share. At the end of the day, it's the E. It's all about equity. Somebody should absolutely be in a better position because you're here. I just did a conference for Beezer Homes the other day, and sometimes, Mike, we have to make sure people understand the difference between equality and equity. You know, equality says everybody in this room should have a pair of shoes. Equity says they need to be the right size, right? So make sure that as faith-based institutions, you don't rush into a community and you take a cookie-cutter model. Take the time to see, to understand, to affirm, bring your resources and relationships, and make sure there's an equitable outcome.
All right, Mike, you got 2 minutes.
I'm gonna steal the shoes remarks, so thank you for that. So This can all be really daunting. We're throwing around big terms like LITEC and CHDO and CDC. We have a very simple motto at Church and Community Development for All People: start small, but start. Okay? You need a dream and an attorney, basically, and everything else can fall into place from there. And there are people in this room who you can tap into for wisdom. Some may charge for their efforts, other deserved, and others may give you their wisdom for free. But there are plenty of people. I mean, it is an embarrassment of riches, because if you're a church and you don't know how you want to get started, there are people you can talk to, and just starting the conversation is a big step in the right direction. So start small, but start.
Wow, Anna, what an impactful day at Prayers to Performance. This gathering brought together faith leaders, policymakers, housing practitioners, and advocates from all across the state. We're all united by shared commitment to expanding housing opportunity. At Miracit, we believe trusted community-centered organizations are essential partners in building sustainable housing solutions. This event was a powerful reminder that collaboration, not isolation, is how we move from vision into action.
On behalf of AHACO, thank you to our speakers, sponsors, and partners who made this convening possible. It is our sincere hope that Prayers to Performance sparked meaningful connections, clarified next steps, and strengthened the collective work ahead. We invite you to explore the other sessions from this series, proudly sponsored by Miracit Development Corporation, and continue engaging in the conversation shaping housing across our region. Thank you for joining us.